So there's been something on my mind recently that I just had to get out of my chest. Um, I've been doing job applications. I have an interview for a company this week, and anyways, I was doing preparation, researching the company, using AI, you know, using all the, doing all these type of things to do research and prepare for my interview, understand who my interviewer is, understand the company, the industry that they're in, who their competitors are, what their sales structure looks like. And I decided to reach out to, I consider this person a friend, someone who's a bit older than me. He's been a professional, corporate professional for, 15 plus years. And I made them, and I thought would be a good idea at the time was asking his advice for basically the reason why I reached out was because this company that I'm interviewing with is in the same industry that he is. And so I thought I would reach out to him and get his input, like on the company. Has he ever heard of it before? Anyway, has he ever heard of it before? Has he been associated with them? Does he know anything about them? And this friend of mine just responded to me with just, I believe it was good intentions, but basically started just blowing up my phone. And this has happened before with this friend, and it's been something that's what's been on my mind. You ask him a question and he'll give you 20, 30 suggestions, and not being, just obviously great suggestions, great things. If you apply them, they could be helpful. Right. And, a couple things that are on my mind. So I want to first off is when you're coaching somebody, a framework that I always like to use is you should only give people 2, max 3, things that you want to coach them on for them to execute. So 3 deliverables that you want them to execute on. If you give people 10 suggestions saying, hey, do this, and this, and that. Yeah, it's good intentions, but it causes, especially if a lot of these things, maybe that person's already doing, but let's just hypothetically say this, because a lot of these things my friend had suggested I'd already done, I'm still doing. And I asked him just one simple question for his thoughts on the industry. I all this stuff he suggested that I do, I've already was doing all morning. And again, trying to be coachable, trying to understand that, I want to, being coachable, and I understand he's a friend. I asked for his advice, but I only asked for his advice in one specific thing. And then he just, again, comes back with all of these things, do this, that, and the other. Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Yeah, I did that. Yeah, I did that. And I obviously didn't say these things. We're all communicating over text. But again, when you're coaching somebody or you feel the need to give somebody counsel, and they're maybe even asking for it, to avoid learning overload, there's actually a study I was just reviewing because this is on my mind. It was a study by Stanford where they studied children learning in schools. And basically, as these children received more and more and more and more information, their ability to execute on that information significantly declined. Now, this only strengthens what I believed as far as with my coaching framework. You only should give 2, possibly 3 things max that somebody, when you're coaching them, that they should execute on. That way, it's actually an action plan. So that's something that, for all you that are coaching or mentoring somebody, though you may have a lot of good ideas, good suggestions, or maybe even things that you think are good ideas, and they probably are. It'd be helpful to ask questions as far as what has the person already done, what have they tried thus far, and then if you are going to give some things like suggestions of what they should do, again, only 2 to 3 deliverables. So that kind of, again, believe more after that, I believe that there's a person's ability to execute or even desire to execute on those things. Let's say they're even not, take away my situation that they're not already doing them, but their motivation to actually do it goes significantly down because they suffer from what I call paralysis by analysis. And I'm not coining that phrase. I think that's been around for a long, long time. But paralysis by analysis, where they just like, I won't do anything. That sounds irrelevant. That sounds, I'm not going to say even the word too hard, but just, they won't even know where to start, right? So that's something, again, about coaching and frameworks. Now, it's kind of segueing into that as well, because I've been preparing all morning. A lot of these suggestions that my friend gave me, I've already been doing them for months and months, but I had been, particularly a lot of these things that he suggested, probably 90% of what he suggested, I already had done this morning. And anyways, I was kind of to the point, I've been doing it for 5 hours straight. And I was reaching a point of just, you get that point where you reach mental exhaustion, but you push past it. Now, I'm a big believer, when you reach that point of mental exhaustion, you should try to push past that, right? I think that's kind of training 101. You don't get stronger, you don't get better if you're not pushing yourself past failure, right? I like to weight train, so that's kind of train harder than last time. I don't mean to use that phrase because that's copyright from Greg Doucette. But go to failure. Try to do more than you did the time before, even if that's just half a rep or a partial rep, right? A partial rep than what you did previously. That's how you get stronger. That's how you get better, and how you're able to do more the next time. But I guess kind of using the same analogy, you will not recover enough to be able to do that if you don't rest as well and do the proper procedures to recover, right? We're talking about eat, sleep, get the proper nutrition, all of that. Pretty much the training to exhaustion does nothing if you don't take time to rest. So my point is, I've gone to a point today where I'm preparing for this interview, and I reached probably the point of overload or just exhaustion, probably I'd say an hour ago. So I guess when I reached out to this friend kind of at the tail end of all this research and this preparation. So maybe my patience was a little short at the time. But my point is, if you reach that point and you've gone far enough, or you've gone to the point where you really are just scramble brain, you're frizzled, you just can't focus. There is a point, and I think this is something that is specifically in any high performance activity, whether we're talking, especially at the professional level, sports, business, there's that I guess I want to say that culture of harder, more. When in reality, it's about intervals, right? You're doing extreme intense focus for short periods of time, and then hopefully you are increasing in your volume of maybe the information you're covering, the intensity or the speed at which you're moving, right? And maybe even be able to do frequency, right? Be able to take less or shorter breaks in between those sessions, right? And this is called micro-learning, right? Taking things line upon line, little by little, and then allowing a time for recovery so that actually has time to sink into your brain and solidify. Going into the psychology a little bit, we're talking about going from your conscious brain to your subconscious brain. And I'm not going to pretend like I understand that. I studied psychology in college a little bit, so I have my major's in partly in psychology. So bringing something from the conscious brain to the subconscious brain takes time and repetition, right? And so you obviously want to put in the reps, right? That's where I think the putting in the work mentality comes from. Like, hey, you got to put in the work, you got to put in the reps, you got to put in the time. Otherwise, if you're obviously inconsistent, then those little intervals or those high intensity intervals are going to be mute. But again, I just want to I'm just kind of tying it back here. Put yourself, going back to the coaching, find 2 to 3 3 deliverables that you can execute on, things that you plan you're going to execute, and then do it, right? And then get to the point where you're going to push yourself to failure, to the point where you feel exhausted, and try to push yourself just a little bit further. But there will become a point where we call about over-prepared or overstimulation, too much information, where you just can't execute on anything. And that's just something I wanted to share because I kind of hit that point again an hour ago. Kept pushing, and I realized that I'm just at a point of exhaustion where I'm like, even let's say my interview was today or my interview was tomorrow, I probably would have zero motivation, or even I wouldn't even say motivation, but I wouldn't have the information retained in my brain ready, prepared for the interview. So right now I'm taking a step back, taking a break. Again, I've been doing it for about 5 hours and I am exhausted. And again, micro learning. And this is something I think I've told you guys this before, but I have kids. I have two. And this is something early in my parenting career, we'll call it career, right? My son's 10, my daughter's just turned 9. Especially when they were younger, I think because I grew up in a household where it was like push, 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 push. And I think I am very grateful to my parents for what they did and how they raised me. But there was a lot of push, 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 push to the point of where if I didn't feel exhausted, if I didn't feel like I had pushed myself to absolute past that point of exhaustion, I wasn't successful. I wasn't valuable. What I had accomplished wasn't impactful, right? Because especially when you're doing something, you're not looking for, it's not about the time, it's about the impact that it's going to have, right? But anyways, going back to I'm kind of coming back here full circle. Sorry, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. But with my kids, when I would teach them a concept or a thing, I would just go down a path and just spray them with a fire hose of information, whatever thing we're talking about. Maybe it's a little similar to what I'm doing right now. So I'm still learning, I'm still growing from that. But okay, what are the 2 to 3 deliverables that I hope that they execute from this discussion, or that from this family? Sometimes we have family discussions, family meetings, family lessons about certain things, whether that's about life or, Mike, I guess you guys know I'm a faith-based person, so whether that's about faith and gospel-related topics, whatever it may be, 2 to 3 deliverables to avoid overload to the point where someone is demotivated to execute. And I think part of the reason why we're demotivated to execute when we have so much information is because we're not able to make the connection of the relevancy of the information, right? We have time to we need a concept, and then we need to see, okay, if this concept or this principle that I'm going to apply, or this action I'm going to take, what is the impact? And then a lot of times when we hear so many things at one time, we hear oh, that sounds good, that sounds good, that sounds good, but we don't take time to slow down and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Why? This will be the impact of what I'm doing, right? That's a lot more powerful. Understanding the impact and the result, which equates to the reason of why you're doing it in the first place. Otherwise, we're just blindly working without even really with the goal in mind, or at least maybe the goal in mind, but not understanding how the actions that we're taking, the impact that they're making, how those actually equate to the result. And I hope that makes sense. But again, just those 2 things are on my mind today as I've been going through this experience today. And maybe it can relate with some of you. But when you're coaching, right, 2 to 3 deliverables. When you're coaching, and that's, I guess, coaching others, but coaching yourself, and coming up with, learning something new, applying something new in your life, 2 to 3 deliverables. Try to understand, what am I going to do? What is going to be the impact of what I do today? And then go with that. And I think we can avoid this paralysis by analysis, or even just this frenzied work momentum that really at the end of the day equates to nothing. Yeah, you got a lot of check boxes, a lot of your to-do list checked off, but there is no impact with those. So I just wanted to share that with you. Hope it was helpful. We'll talk to you next time.